Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the webinar held on behalf of the APM and in particular the Northeast branch. I'm extremely pleased to be able to introduce this presentation this evening titled The Superyachts Desperately Seeking the Business Case. This webinar should last approximately 45 to 60 minutes, consisting of Q&A post presentation. If I could ask that people post the questions in the chat function within GoToWebinar, be appreciated, and we'll follow up with that at the end of the presentation. So this evening presentation will be recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube post-event, and the slides will be shared via the APM website post-event. Today we're joined by Kevin Laverty, Director of Projects with Hill Robinson International, who has a vast experience in project professional community, who moved into the super yacht industry in around 2004. I don't want to steal too much of Kevin's thunder, so without further ado, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce Kevin.
Thank you, David. I hope everybody can hear me loud and clear, and I'll just say good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a happy new year to you all. As David's mentioned, I recently joined the APM Northeast branch, and he was keen to learn a little bit more about the esoteric world of super yachts. And the idea for this event was born out of that, really. Thanks to the small matter of the pandemic, of course, the event developed from being a local in-person branch event to being this webinar. And whilst, like most of us, have become a veteran of the online meeting, I have to say this is my first attempt at presenting in an online format. So it's very much a voyage of discovery for us all. One thing I would like to make clear is that any opinions I express during this presentation are in fact my own opinions. They're not the opinions of the APM or indeed Hill Robinson, my employer, who've very kindly allowed me to use their rather swish PowerPoint presentation pack. And I've also tried to credit the sources I've used where I've used other sources. Where there are no credits, it's all down to me. So yeah, you know who to shout at if you think I've got it wrong. As David said, I've been involved in the construction, refit and operation of super yachts since 2004. When I arrived on my first project, barely knowing my stem from stern or my port from starboard. And in tonight's webinar, I really hope to give you a glimpse into the world of super yachts and the clash with what you and I would all recognize as project management. So moving on, I think the first thing to address is just what is a super yacht. The term super yacht, as far as I can find, was first used around the start of the 20th century. There is no accepted definition of the term super yacht, although it's generally accepted to mean a crewed motor or sailing vessel used for leisure purposes that is greater than 24 meters in length overall. Terms such as super yacht, mega yacht and giga yacht are all creations of the press. In terms of the rules and regulations around the construction and operation of super yachts, all yachts greater than 24 meters length overall are simply referred to as large yachts, like that one. So there we've got the magnificent Dilbar cruising gracefully in some very calm waters. And it's difficult from that image to really appreciate the scale of that particular yacht. But if I share that view with you of her in her own home port in Antibes, I think it brings into focus her 156 meter length, 26 meter beam, and 15,900 gross tons. She reportedly carries 36 passengers, served by a crew of 96, and includes a 25 meter long swimming pool, which is actually big enough to qualify as a super yacht in its own right. Oh, and by the way, she's not the largest super yacht afloat today. That distinction going to Azam, which is over 180 meters long. So quite a beast. It's generally accepted that there are three flavors of super yacht. production, semi-custom and full custom. Production vessels tend to be at the lower end of the size range. Buying a new production vessel is a little bit like buying a car. You can select from a catalogue of possible colours, interior trim options and upgrades to allow an element of individuality whilst giving the builder certainty over construction cost and timescale. Semi-custom vessels take that level of customisation to a greater level. The buyer may be able to specify a completely bespoke interior, albeit within the predetermined watertight bulkhead and fire boundary layout specified by the builder. The extent of customisations is really limited only by the depth of the buyer's pockets. And then at the other extreme, we have the full custom yacht, where the design begins from a completely blank sheet of paper, or more likely in this day and age, an empty 3D model space. And the vessel is designed and engineered as a complete one-off, tailored exactly to the requirements of the buyer. There's no repeat return on the design engineering investment for the builder, and this is therefore the most expensive of the three options, and therefore is generally the preserve of the larger end of the market. However, as you'll find with all things super yacht, there's a certain element of grey lines, and here are two yachts that are both 80 metres plus long, but would actually fall into that semi-custom category, because as well as sharing the same designer and the same shipbuilder, they share the same technical platform. And by technical platform, I mean everything below the waterline. So all the tanks, all the engineering, the propulsion systems, etc. They're all shared. The top yacht is the iconic Alfa Nero, 82 metres, designed by Nuvolari Leonard and built by Ocean Co. And the lower yacht is by the same designer and builder, called Vibrant Curiosity. And I have to say, I think she is one of the most beautiful yachts ever built. But then again, I may be biased. A couple of key terms I want to introduce you to, because I'm going to be using them recurring through the presentation. The first of which is length overall. Naval architects, in my experience, seem to love to make things as difficult as they possibly can. As I think that little diagram illustrates just how many lengths they can come up with. The good news about length overall is it's as simple as it seems. It's the length from the tip of the bow or the bulbous bow to the tip of the stern, and it's typically measured along the longitudinal centre line of the vessel. So length overall actually means what it is. The next term is gross tonnage. Gross tonnage, by its name, might suggest to you that it's actually a measure of weight or mass. Well, it's neither. It's actually a measure of internal cargo space, measured in wine barrels or wine casks or tons, hence the gross tonnage. And it's calculated by a very, very simple formula, which I've put there just in case any of you wish to run through and calculate the gross tonnage of any passing vessel that may be going past your window at the moment. Yeah, but those two terms will come up several times as we go through the presentation. Just to give you an idea of the scale of the super yacht world and the super yacht industry, the total world fleet is currently reported at 8,781 vessels. So that's 8,781 boats greater than 24 metres in length, ranging all the way up to, as I say, Azam at 181 metres. Interestingly, super yachting is not a new thing. And as you see on the slide there, the earliest recorded super yachts, i.e. greater than 24 metres, were actually built back in 1700. And between 1700 and 1899, there were 19 such vessels built for leisure purposes. In real terms, modern super yachting took off in the 1930s with the creation of what we would all recognise now as the classical gentleman's motor yacht. And the rate of expansion of the fleet has roughly doubled every decade from early 1980 onwards, and it looks like there's no signs of that slowing down as we move into 2022. Just to give you a scale of this part of the graph there, from the year 2000 onwards, the second graph breaks that out, and it shows you that there's been a rather steady rise with 6,000 vessels launched between January 2020 and today. It's also quite an interesting graph if you consider that in 2007 we had a rather large financial crash, which affected the ultra high net worth community just as it did many other communities. But you'll see that the number of launches continued to rise through 2007, 2008, and only began to fall in 2009. And that's just an indicator of the gestation period of building a super yacht, which for a full custom design can be anywhere 48, 60 months from initial idea through to delivery of the vessel. And that's why we see that dip in 2010, 11, 12, 13, etc., as that started to impact on the order books of the shipbuilders. Super yachts, of course, well, yep, they are sexy things, and the press love to talk about them every now and again. We've all seen the headline-grabbing articles in the press referring to super yachts as either playthings of the rich and famous or an ostentatious display of wealth, depending on what mood they're in. But the fact that the entire industry operates behind an iron curtain of non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality clauses means the poor journalists they're left scratching around for anything that vaguely resembles a fact. Armed with scant information, they often resort to embellishment to pad out what would otherwise be a photograph of a supermodel on a yacht in Port Hercule, Monaco. One of the most frequent things they get wrong is price. And price is a bit of a moving target, so I can understand why they get it wrong. When I joined the industry in 2004, the average price per meter length overall was €1 million. By 2021, that average price had risen to €2.1 million per meter. However, as yachts get bigger, get longer, get more beam, get more volume, length overall becomes a less reliable indicator of price. And the industry has moved towards price per gross ton. Looking back again, in 2004, the average price per gross ton was €35,000. And by last year, that average price had risen to almost €54,000. Now, these are very sweeping, generalizing averages. You can imagine there's all sorts of peaks and troughs in there as to whether you're in full custom, semi-custom production, whether you're building 40 meters or 140 meters. But they just give you an indication of where pricing is and where pricing's gone. And there's a very good graph, I think. It's one of my own, and it just shows the development of those prices over that period. Another thing the press love to get wrong are the features on board these yachts. Gold-plated bathtubs. I've seen it in many an article, but I've never actually seen one on board a super yacht. They may exist, but I haven't seen one. Submarines, yes, definitely do exist. Helicopter hangars, yes, this is something that we're seeing more of. There's a new variant of super yacht taking the market by storm, the Explorer yacht. And on Explorer yachts, you will typically find submarines and helicopter hangars. There is, however, a number of complications with putting a helicopter in a hangar on a boat, as any of the Royal Navy members will know, not least of which is the fragility of the rotor blades. So you really have to have a good plan if you're going to have a helicopter hangar on board. This one comes up time and time again, and I can say categorically, no, there is no super yacht sailing around the world with a missile defense system. And the reason I can say that is categorically is if you've ever tried to buy a Canadian long-range night vision camera, ship it to a European shipyard and install it on board a Cayman Islands-owned vessel, you will know that it would be almost impossible, well, it would be impossible to do the same with an armed defence mechanism. But that's not going to stop the Sun, etc., alleging that Mr. Abramovich's yachts carry a missile defence system. The other one that the press get wrong, time and time again, much to my amusement, is length. And that's because we Europeans, I still think of myself as a European, like to talk about length in meters. And of course, our American cousins like to talk about length in feet and inches. And that's why you get ludicrous things such as the 330-meter long super yacht, which doesn't actually exist as of yet. So what's all this got to do with the UK? Well, you might be pleasantly surprised. We were leaders in building super yachts for many years. This is a list of shipyards around the country who have all built more than one super yacht in the last 100 years. Sadly, there's only those 5 left in production today, but that's not to say that the UK doesn't have a big connection with the super yacht industry. Most of the main brokerage houses maintain offices here in the UK. We have some of the best consultants and surveyors based here in the UK. Same with designers. There was a recent article by Super Yacht News, I think it was, who said that 70% of all yachts launched in the last 10 years had a British design, which I think is quite interesting. Naval architects, we've got a number of leading naval architectural practices here in the UK, working right across the size range. Probably the greyer areas, financial services, helping the rich to stay rich but still own super yachts. We lead the world, I think, in that sector. Surprisingly, fine furniture manufacturing, a number of companies based in the UK churning out some absolutely superb bespoke furniture pieces, real artisan quality, with price to match, but just fantastic and really set off the interior of these yachts. We actually have interior outfit companies based here in the UK. We've got a new entrant to the marketplace from Northern Ireland, and a couple of established companies here down on the south coast of England. Law firms, many super yacht owners, many ultra high net worth individuals still prefer the certainty of UK construction law, and UK law firms do very well in sale purchase transactions, new build contracts, etc. We have a vibrant supply chain. I wrote down a few examples, everything from custom light fittings, underwater lights, vessel security systems, AVIT installations, glassware, crockery, silverware, all the way through to crew uniform, linens, towels, and even guest slippers. They're all coming from UK suppliers. And then finally, we have a number of yacht managers based in the UK. And the yacht manager, well, if you're lucky enough to own a super yacht, I really suggest you appoint the yacht manager, because they're the one that are going to take away all of the pain and the misery and the mystique around ownership and manage your yacht so you can just enjoy it, albeit for a very competitive fixed monthly fee. I've got to say that I work for a yacht management company. The Northeast connection, well, we used to build super yachts in the northeast of England, believe it or not. On the Weir, there were three super yachts built in the 1960s. On the Tyne, 5 between 1929 and 1980. The 1980 vessel, Blue de Nîmes, is on the market today. and I think it's a cool 47 million. So, you know, if you fancy a northeast built super yacht, I'll recommend you check out Blue Denims. In addition to that, we contribute to the super yacht supply chain. Here's a few examples. South Shields Marine College, still the #1 source of turning young men and young women into the deck and engineering officers that this growing super yacht fleet needs, and also in continuing their training as they make their way from junior ranks all the way to captain or chief engineer. And these are just a few examples of companies that I work with based here in the Northeast, who are actually world leaders. So we've got the Safina Group, who are everything there is to know about paint and coatings. International Paints, of course, based in Felling. They are the undisputed world leader through their All Grip brand of paints and fairing materials. We actually have a couple of boutique brokerage and yacht management businesses based here, right here in the Northeast. And there are a lot of us, independent surveyors, owners, representatives, and project managers based here. In fact, if you board the red eye on a Monday morning from Newcastle to Amsterdam, or indeed the return flight at 10 p.m. on a Friday night, you're almost certain to be sharing the plane with at least one of those guys. And finally, some of the biggest super yacht law firms maintain offices here in the city of Newcastle. So there's still quite a strong Northeast connection to this international industry. So, what's all that got to do with project management? Well, in those halcyon pre-pandemic days, I took part in a debate at the Superyacht Forum, which is an annual industry event that takes place in parallel with the Marine Equipment Trade Show, or METS as most people know it, in Amsterdam. The panel I took part in the debate on was on the topic of project management, and the talk was well attended, including by all the leading shipbuilders and superyacht builders. And what became apparent from that discussion was the impact of unprofessional owners' representatives and owners' teams, and the impact that was having on superyacht projects. The industry's been pretty slow to adopt any form of professional project management, which is pretty remarkable when you consider that the act of building or refitting a superyacht is, as I say there, quite a complex thing with multiple stakeholders, and the sums of money involved are vast, and the liquidated damage provisions of the contracts and the litigious nature of the clientele all make it quite a risky business for the shipbuilder. But the problem is that whilst the new build and the refit shipyards recognise the need for strong project management, they're either unable or unwilling to dictate to the buyer that the owner must appoint a suitably qualified and experienced person to act as their representative. Just to give you an idea of the first 3 tiers of a typical stakeholder map for a superyacht new build project. At the centre, as you would expect, is the object of the project, the thing that's going to become your bright, shiny new superyacht at the end. And there are 3 main players in the contractual relationship: the owner, the owner's representative, and the builder. In addition, there are a whole bunch of influencers. That's a word that people like to use these days, influencers. The Classification Society, the Flag Administration, IMO, the International Maritime Organization, to the insurers, to the lawyers that are negotiating the contracts. And I shouldn't forget our friends, the brokers, who will bring the willing buyer and the willing seller together in a perfect match made in heaven and then disappear over the horizon with a very nice brokerage fee. If you look at a typical owner's team, and this is quite a typical owner's team here, the owner's rep will have all of these people reporting to him, and he will be, or she will be, responsible for obtaining what are called the owner-supplied items. And that's everything from the custom tenders and the water toys that go on board to furnishings, art, linens, towels, bedding, etc. I once had the pleasure of hanging an original Picasso on board a super yacht where the painting actually cost more than the yacht on which it went on board. And the owner was very generous in that he hung the Picasso in one of the guest day toilets. So you could look at a painting of such value whilst washing your hands. Very unusual situation, but that was that. On the other side of the equation, the builder comes along with his cast of thousands, and you'll see that many are repeated between the two sides as we seek to ensure that the project is exactly what it's meant to be, i.e. the buyer gets what the builder sold. Now, if you consider that each and every one of these builder team members will have their own teams outside of that, with subcontractors and suppliers and specialist vendors, etc., I think you can begin to see that any one of these people mismanaged or misperforming has the ability to ruin your day or indeed your super yacht project. So that's just a typical first 3 layers of your stakeholder map. So I mentioned this guy or lady, the owner's project manager, the owner's representative. A few facts about this person. The role will be defined in the new build or refit contract. So it's written in there. Will have power of attorney to act on behalf of and to legally bind the owner. So they better know what they're doing. Will have specified duties to execute as the post holder. It'll be in there. It'll tell you what you must do and also what you must not do. Failure to act or to act in time may incur penalties for the owner or waive certain rights. Some of those rights can be carefully negotiated rights. So owners are not very happy if you give those away for free. The owner's rep is required to review and approve drawings, specifications and technical documents. That's why you will often be supported by the types of people we saw on that earlier slide of the stakeholders. You will be required to attend inspections, test trials and draw conclusions as to the results. And just in case I have made this sound a little bit sexy, just thought I'd share this photograph with you, which is what a shipyard described to me as a slightly restricted tank entry. My colleague Jamie managed to make it down there, I didn't. But that's what attending a test, trial or inspection can involve. To fulfill the role of owner's representative, what are the requirements? Well, you should have a sound working knowledge of the law of contract and tort. I think that's common for all project managers. You should have a good working knowledge of managing complex multidisciplinary capital projects with geographically dispersed project teams. Why did I even write that? That's way too many words, but basically complex projects. You should have a working knowledge of naval architecture, including weight control and stability. That's quite important if you want the thing to float the right way up when you finish building it. You should have a working knowledge of ship design, including the classification society rules, the flag administration codes and rules, and IMO regulations, codes and conventions. All of these things influence the design of the vessel. You need to have a working knowledge of shipyard construction, including steel, aluminium and composite, mechanical and pipework engineering, and electrical engineering. And if you don't have that knowledge, you better get somebody in your team that does, because you're going to be required to review and approve those drawings. You should have a working knowledge of yacht construction, including interior outfitting, exterior outfitting, teak decks, fairing, painting, audio-visual and information technology systems, navigation and communication systems, etc., etc. Galleys, pantries, you name it, you should know about it. You should also have a working knowledge of yacht operations and crewing, because at the end of the day, this vessel has to operate, and it has to be able to operate in the way the owner intends it to. And finally, you need to know everything else that's not listed above. And all I'll say here is remember that Google is your friend. So, who can be the owner's representative? I'm going to give you a few ideas here, but when I'm relaxing and I'm not reading an APM publication, so it's rare, but you know, when it happens, I like to shout at the television. To do this, I find programs like Grand Designs are typically best, and it's normally when the presenter, Kevin MacLeod, announces that due to budget pressures, Mr. or Mrs. Optimistic Self-Builder is going to project manage the build. I don't know how many other professionals in the room or on the webinar do the same, but I normally groan at that point because we know what's coming, don't we? Well, you might find this surprising, but it's exactly the same in Superyachts. So, having looked at the role and having looked at the requirements, who can be the owner's representative? Well, obviously, a suitably qualified and experienced project manager appointed by the owner. That would be a pretty good place to start, wouldn't it? The buying broker. Okay, probably they're not the best idea for the buyer, but a pretty good client retention policy for the broker, certainly. The owner's current captain. Right. Another sweeping generalization coming here. There are examples of some captains out there who are more than capable of being exemplary and excellent owners' representatives. However, there's also a lot of unemployed captains out there at the moment trading as project managers as well, and they may not be as well qualified or suitable to the role. I think the expression caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, applies there. Somebody else who you often see as the owner's representative is a trusted friend of the owner. That friend may or may not know anything about superyachts or superyacht contracts or construction or even the weather. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Yes, we see the head of the owner's private office. Ultra high net worth individuals often have a family office to take care of their investments and their travel, etc. And these places are typically headed up by somebody of a financial background, which is great for the budget when you're managing a superyacht project, but perhaps not so good when it gets to the acceptance sea trials at the end. Yep, the owner's accountant, lawyer, personal assistant, yep, seen them all, yep. A relative of the owner, definitely, that's happened. It happened to me and it worked very well, but it doesn't always work well. And I've thrown this one in case we've got any lawyers watching this evening. And basically he's there as a catch-all to say that basically anybody can be an owner's representative, whether you've got the skills or you haven't. Few typical project outcomes I've encountered, and I'll leave you to draw the lines between the various owner representatives and the various outcomes. So that's the one we're all striving for every day. That's the one you often see, and I certainly see in some of the expert witness work I've done. Yep, seen that too, and very much seen litigation. So it happens, you know. Here's a couple of examples of the contractual framework in which you find yourself working in superyachts. In the new build world, and if you consider the breadth of the role of the owner's representative, your life is considerably easier if the builder refit contract is at least mutual in the allocation of responsibilities. However, that's not always the case. Most of the new build projects I've been involved in have used a derivative of a contract model authored by Clifford Chance LLP several years ago, which runs to about 50 pages plus schedules. Now, coming from the oil and gas industry to superyachts, coming from oil and gas with contracts running into many, many volumes and arriving in superyachts with a 50-page contract was a bit of a, I've got to say, a bit of a culture shock. Few interesting things about this contract model makes no mention of project management really at all. Normally includes only one meeting per month between the buyer and the seller, and that meeting is minuted by the builder. So guess what those minutes are like if you're not careful. Might include a one-page milestone or level 1 project plan if you're lucky, but that will probably contain little more than the dates for stage payments and the delivery of the owner supplied items, which might be okay, but it's not much good to you when you're trying to assess prolongation or delay. In refit, it's not much different. The most popular contract form is the ICOMIA standard yacht refit repair contract. This contract does include the requirement for the owner to appoint an owner's representative, but no reciprocal need for a contractor representative. So what? Well, very clever shipyards can inundate the single owner's representative with many, many requests for information, requests for approvals, etc., from all their different department heads, saturating the owner's representative. And if you don't think that's the case, here's a couple of helpful provisions from the ICOMIA contract. The first of which requires the owner's representative to provide all reasonable assistance to facilitate the timely and efficient completing of the works. Never had that one recited to me more than once a day. And the second one is, in the case of any communication to the owner representative, if not answered after 3 working days, the contractor shall be entitled to assume the owner's representative agreement to the content. Well, if you're being saturated and you've only got 3 days to reply, you better be on your toes. So it's quite a challenge. Again, the ICOMIA contract makes no mention of project management or no requirement to include a project plan. So actually, an unnegotiated refit or new build contract can be a minefield for the owner's representative to navigate through. Of course, if you can get there early enough, there is the opportunity to negotiate and correct these omissions, but in my experience, I've only had that opportunity on a small percentage of projects. So I've been fighting against these things for the last many years, but it feels like a lot longer. So what has all this got to do with business cases? So given that that is the landscape in which superyacht owners' representatives operate, and carrying on the conversation with the Superyacht Forum, where the industry is really saying, hey, we like a professional relationship between all parties, when David asked me to pull a presentation together, I thought about what that professional relationship might look like in terms of project management. As many of you will know from your day jobs, a business case is a powerful tool. It gives you the ammunition you need to manage the project effectively. And it's an essential element of some of the models that we use to manage projects. Here in our own APM body of knowledge publication, we see the business case being referred to on multiple occasions. And if you look at something like Prince 2, the business case is a core theme there. And you're going to struggle to meet the 7 principles without a business case, no matter how well tailored your business case is. The purpose of the business case is to establish mechanisms to judge whether the project is and remains desirable, viable, and achievable. Okay? But I can hear you saying, oh, come on, Kevin, you're not going to tell me that superyacht projects fail the viability test halfway through. Well, they do. So this is PJ World, which I think is about 84 meters long and has been lying in a Norwegian fjord in a part complete state since 2008. And it's available for a snip on today's market if you were enthusiastic enough to take it on. But that's just one example. There are many others. Here's another one. This is hull M25, which was started in Italy back in 2005. and is very much in that same condition today and is available on the market for a very special price for an enthusiastic buyer, quote unquote. So, summary time. I forgot to start my timer, so I'm not sure where I am on timescales, but never mind. I might have talked too quickly. I apologise if I have. In summary, the superyacht world is going through a significant demand cycle, which shows no sign of slowing. The pandemic, if anything, has made us busier than anything else. As an industry, we are slowly becoming better organised and more professional, but there is still a long way to go, specifically in educating owners and buyers. This week, I saw an interesting article around the area of designers, suggesting that designers should be a qualified position in the same way as an architect is. And I can only support that too, because when you see some of the, shall we call them concepts that get published in the Superyacht press, you realise that it's actually just somebody who's got a nice set of crayons and not much actual knowledge or experience. There will be increasing opportunities for professional project managers on both sides of a new build or refit contract equation. I'm seeing that today. It's real, and if you have the necessary skills or you have the necessary ambition to gain those skills, opportunities abound across the world. Superyacht projects will continue to present a significant complex technical challenge because owners do want the very latest and the very best. And we are challenged every day to produce that on ever shorter timescales. And finally, just like every other project manager on this call tonight, we face the dual challenge of sustainability and reducing our environmental impact, which is a real challenge. But steps are being taken, but it's early days in the journey. And back to the opening slide. Coincidence. Final thought. Yeah. So this is the 55-metre Superyacht Sovereign, which is currently named Loon, when it visited Newcastle upon Tyne in 2014 and moored right here in the heart of the city. To the best of my knowledge, this is the only time a superyacht has made a port call in the city, i.e. a visit with guests on board. What's the coincidence? Well, Superyacht Sovereign was actually built by Newcastle Marine of Florida, USA. I think it's a coincidence. And finally, I'd like to say thank you for listening, and I'd like to share with you one of my favourite images as an owner's representative, and that is of a superyacht delivered and disappearing over the horizon. Thank you very much. How did I do, David, on time?
You did very well, Kevin. You'd be surprised that we've ran to around 7:15 there, so it's really good timing. It's very interesting subject, very interesting industry, but also sounds extremely challenging, trying to meet demanding clients' needs throughout pretty much every turn of, from concept to delivery itself. We'll open the floor to Q&A. I've got a couple myself that I'd like to nail down if you don't mind. My first one being, do clients ever consider the LOA versus where they can berth the things? So, everybody wants to pull into the latest and greatest and hottest places. When these guys are throwing money at it, no matter what the budget, do they ever think about, oh, well, actually, I can't squeeze that thing in there, so I'll restrict what I'm doing?
Some do, some don't. It's an arms race. It really is. For some owners, it's an arms race. It's a competition to have the biggest super yacht. For others, there's practical considerations. If you build a super yacht with 15,000 gross tons of interior, what are you going to fill it with? You end up with multiple salons, which are beautifully decorated, but there's only you and your 36 guests on board. What are you going to do with all these spaces? So, shall we say, experienced owners will give consideration to the size of the vessel and their intended use for it. But for others, it's a status symbol.
Yeah,
In the same
definitely.
way, as the same way as the property is, or the helicopter, or the private jet.
My last one from me before I move on to the floor is being an ex-submariner, I perversely used to enjoy a bit of surface navigation. I was looking at the commercial, world. I understand that systems such as B&G systems are used for navigation, but we used to use a system called ECDIS. I don't know
Yes.
if that's ever implemented in the super yacht industry. I know it's used in the commercial world, but I
Yeah,
didn't know whether those sort of systems were fitted on super yachts.
they are indeed. Yep,
Hmm.
and along with what we call the glass bridge, so
Yeah,
the house, which is almost all electronic now and displays rather than physical instruments.
yeah.
But ECDIS, yes, definitely pay for sale chart purchasing. So
Hmm.
you only pay for the charts for the areas you've actually sailed through,
Mm.
and totally paperless bridges. These are all sort of de facto in the super yacht market.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We'll move to the floor. So, Rob Pengilly's got a bit of a question there. Where do you pull the design, build, safety standards from? What's the country of origin on based internationally for these standard and guidelines?
Well, there's various stages to that, or various parts to that answer. Um, the the nation state where the vessel is flagged will have their own safety standards. So Cayman Islands are part of the Red Ensign group, although the Cayman Islands actually lead the publication of the Large Yacht Code. Um, um, then you've got your choice of classification society. So your classification society is really, I guess, making the ship insurable at the end of the day. And you have the normal choices that you see in the marine industry. So, DNV, Lloyd's, it's Rena, etc. there. And they have little geographical localized centers, Rena obviously does very well in Italy. Lloyd's Register does reasonably well in Northern Europe, etc., etc. And then, of course, we have the overarching IMO codes, which are, worldwide codes that apply. So it's important to know where the vessel is going to be registered first, which classification society you're going to be using, and that will give you the framework then to start your design process.
I suppose that leads into the reasoning why you see quite a lot of super yachts or yachts in general with flying the red ensign. So it's not just around, the country of origin or where it's built. It's around, insurance purposes and legislative
Yeah, yeah.
guidelines and stuff. So yeah, I see the link between that now. Um, Rob Pengelly's just dropped another one in at the back end there. He wants to know about the launch parties. So you must have some crazy launch party stories at the back end of your commissioning piece.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there are extensive non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality clauses,
Ooh.
and I'd just like to mention that I also haven't been to any parties at 10 Downing Street. Okay, so just,
That's
put
fair
that out there.
enough.
Yeah, yeah, but there are some spectacular launch events. Yes,
Well, I bet
yes.
they are. I bet they are. Alison's asked the question. It seems it's very difficult to break into the industry as a project manager. How often do newcomers break through?
It's a lot easier than you might think if you can meet some of those criteria that I set out for the owner representative role. Shipyards tend to get their project managers from the traditional technical routes, so from technical universities, etc. And of course, they'll tend to use domestic nationals. So if it's a Dutch builder, I'll typically be working opposite a Dutch project manager for the shipyard. German the same, etc. But on the owner's side, it's relatively easy to break in. We ourselves, Hill Robinson, we recruit. Our fleet's been growing exponentially over the last 5 years, so we've been almost constantly recruiting. The problem is that we get a lot of people who don't meet those criteria, and simply being a good project manager isn't enough, So
Yeah, definitely.
you can get in, but you have to want to get in, and you have to demonstrate some of those skills and some of that knowledge to do so.
Yeah, completely understand. Phil's dropped a question saying, thanks for a great presentation, Kevin. I take it the business case and the owner requirements changes almost on a daily basis. Is this captured by change control? And are these signed off every time the owner representative, by the owner representative?
Yes, actually one thing we're quite good at is change control. I was critical earlier of the contract forms, but both of those contract forms I mentioned have extensive change control provisions within them. We also have schedule of rates, etc., in there to allow the pricing of variations. The difficult part is always time, because the lack of planning. So it's very difficult to assess the impact. If you don't have a good critical path plan, it's very difficult to plug in or remove work and really see the impact of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty well controlled, actually. Yes, yeah, and yes, I, as the owner's representative, you will be signing off those change orders.
Yeah. We've got one from our very own Dave Stevenson, who's on the North East Committee. Great presentation. Thank you, Kevin. If you had to pick one project management tool or technique that the super yacht industry would benefit from, what would it be?
One tool or technique. I think we could get a lot better at task management if we were to share a task management application. So, recent project of mine, the owner's team were running one task management application, and the shipyard were running a separate task management application, and that meant that there was a manual alignment of the two on a weekly basis. Obviously, the way modern task management tools are developed these days, that's, you're supposed to all work collaboratively in the same environment, but we can be a little bit old-fashioned, and we worry about when was a document sent, was it returned within the deadline, within the contract, etc. So people like to stick to the old methods sometimes, But I think the one thing that we could improve on new build is by having a standardized task management platform that could cover drawing review processes and document reviews, etc.
Yeah. Just a bit of a shout out rather than a question from Karina. Thank you. Interesting listen. She was previously employed by Princess Yachts.
Okay, yeah.
And she's now working for Babcock. So,
yep.
Mohammed, thank you very much. Joel, presumably scope creep in design of a super yacht is a frequent challenge. Are there any particular tools and techniques for managing this, given that the owners, clients, will be emotionally as well as financially invested in the project?
Well, I think that if you're doing a full custom design, scope creep is a challenge to control, because you begin with an outline. I don't know whether this is going to work or not, but you begin with an image. Yeah, we're going to build one of these. Nobody really knows what it's going to take to build it until you start building it, but you might be building it for a fixed price. So it's very difficult to actually nail the scope in the first place accurately there. Owners' requests, they're always going to happen. Owners will go on board friends' yachts, they'll see things and they'll come to you. You might be in the final commissioning stages, you might have a month to go, and they come and they say, as one owner did to me once, I'd like the yacht to be 6 meters longer. Now, go back to what I said about the semi-custom
Yeah.
world or the full custom world. If you've got deep enough pockets, you can have whatever you want. Yeah.
Too late, Popeye. That's what.
Well, yeah, that would be an unpopular answer, but it's certainly something that we do deal with. And how do you control it? Sorry, it's good old-fashioned project management. You've got to be all over it. You've got to
Yeah.
be all over the scope. Don't miss a meeting. You can delegate, but you have to be able to, you have to have trust in the people that you're delegating to, that they will keep control of their element of the scope as well. But it is literally being all over the scope at all times.
Pleased to know. Last couple, another one from Rob, who lost his internet connection halfway through the presentation. He's keen to understand how. So maybe we could just quantify how many yachts were built in the last financial year, roughly, in the industry, Kevin.
I actually don't know off the top of my head. I can find out and let you know. It's publicly available information. Superyacht Times publish a very comprehensive database of all new launches, etc.
He's keen to look for opportunities as well and join a delivery team.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Just send his CV through and we'll consider him.
Steve Carey, is Prince 2 used for any of these projects as a methodology or process?
I haven't come across it. I'm actually a big fan of Prince 2. I use elements of Prince 2 in managing my projects, but I have to be mindful that if I went out and said, right, we're going to do this new build and we're going to use Prince 2, I'd struggle to take half the people with me on the journey that I need to take along. There hasn't really emerged a single project management methodology that would fit super yachts. So I tend to select the best bits and try and bring those together holistically to deliver the project.
Agile and lean.
Agile, well, it's very applicable. We do a lot of in the world of controlling your audiovisual equipment on board. We currently give the owner an iPad with a series of icons on it that do certain things, and there's a lot of coding goes on behind there. And agile methods are particularly applicable to those coding activities when you start talking about delivering, minimum viable product early, so that we can then get on with physical testing whilst we add the bells and the whistles. So that works very well there. You also find that software developers are very agile thinking as well. They're used to the methodology and they're used to working in that way. If I was designing the scantlings or the skeleton of the vessel, and I talked about an agile iterative process there, I think I'd spend more time trying to educate people than I would actually designing the scantlings. Yeah. And in fact, another project I was involved with, they got themselves into a bit of a mess with change control. The builder got itself into a bit of a mess with change control. And their project manager tried to use an agile approach to producing the change orders. And they spent, their stand-up meetings started to take 3 or 4 hours, which was a pretty good indication that agile's not really working for them, But he was facing the challenge of having to educate the full team who were contributing to the change order, So yeah. There's certainly space for agile, but it's in particular elements of the project.
Definitely the last one, Kevin. It's just sparked my interest a little bit, to be honest. So, and then we'll probably call it a day after that. Mohammed's
free to buy me a beer at any time, David, and I'll wax lyrical,
Mohammed's dropped in there. Has digital twin technology been used to make any of the products or processes? So, have you used modern construction technologies, BIM, digital twin, anything like that?
Not well. We extensively use 3D modeling, particularly when you get into the areas of equipment, layouts, and when you are integrating the luxury interior inside what we call the net space, the remaining space in a salon, for example, after all the cable trays, all the pipes, all the HVAC ducting, etc. So we model all that in 3D. There isn't really a database that you could use sort of BIM techniques against. You know, there isn't really an international price book or anything like that you could link in. And it would be, to be perfectly honest, you know, having thought about it in the past, it'd be very difficult to do that, given the one-off nature of what it is that we're doing. You know,
I suppose from a digital twin perspective, I can see benefits in, you know, maintenance regimes or replacing equipment that, you know, a pump or a system. If you try to identify, you know, parts and servicing, then that's where potentially the digital twin could add benefit.
It certainly can, but equally so can a third engineer.
Yeah.
You know, armed with an iPhone. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
He can be my inspector on the ground mid-Atlantic when the pump fails. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, a lot of 3D modeling now, which is used both for the maintenance of the vessel and for the initial build. And we use, of course, now everything is in the cloud. We use cloud-based planned maintenance systems, for example. So I can sit here and I can log into one of my vessels and make sure that the you know, the generator servicing is up to date, or the you know, the coolers have been flushed, or at least the engineers reported he's flushed the coolers. Probably
Sounds a dream. And that's about it. I think we've probably exceeded our time limit for questions. I just, on behalf of the APM, Kevin, and, you know, the Northeast branch, I want to extend our thanks for, you know, you taking this time during this busy period to pull together this presentation and share it with, you know, professionals across the region and nationally also as well. It seems like we've got a few people coming in from all reaches of the country. I'm going to attempt to scan and send an Amazon voucher just as a small token of our appreciation. So just want to thank you very much, and just want to reinforce the fact to the people listening that this will be uploaded and it does count as part of your CPD session. So thank you very much to everybody, and that is it. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.